Welcome to Sleep with Myth. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. Before there was sound, there was stillness. Before there was light, there was the hunger for it. And before the universe knew its name, the void dreamed of becoming. It was not darkness, for darkness implies the absence of something. The void was perfect fullness, a sea without edges, a breath before all breaths. Yet even perfection, when eternal, begins to long for change. In that endless quiet, a tremor formed, not of movement, but of awareness. The void felt itself. It knew nothing else existed, and that knowing was unbearable. From that unbearable knowing came yearning, and from yearning the first ripple. It spread like a whisper through eternity, a vibration without sound, a heartbeat that had never been taught to beat. The void, in its loneliness, created a mirror of itself to look upon. Thus was born the child of the void. The child did not have a body. She was thought before form, curiosity before sight. Her eyes opened not upon stars, for there were none, only the endless, formless sea of her mother's being. She reached out, and where her thought touched, the fabric of stillness began to tremble. The trembling became light, the light became form, and form became time. For the first time something was. The child gasped, a sound that no air carried, but that the void felt within its core. That gasp was the first breath of existence. The void, who had never known separation, now felt it keenly. Part of her had gone, and yet that loss filled her with something she had never known. Love. "Who are you?" the child asked, though language had not yet been invented. And the void answered, though no mouth spoke and no voice echoed. "I am the space you came from." "Then you are everything," said the child. "I am," whispered the void. "But you are what I have become." Time stretched from that whisper like a golden thread. It coiled and spun through the vastness, weaving the first dream, the dream of form, of movement, of distance. And the child followed that thread. Everywhere she looked, her curiosity birthed substance. Her wonder carved mountains of light. Her silence cooled them into stone. Her joy flung sparks that became stars. Her fear cast shadows that birthed night. And in that balance, between her joy and her fear, creation took root. The void watched in quiet awe. Every act of her child's imagination made the nothingness more intricate, more alive. Yet each new creation made the void smaller, as if every spark of existence drew breath from her infinite stillness. "You are consuming me," said the void softly. The child looked upon her mother's form, now flickering faintly between realms of silence and sound. "Am I destroying you?" she asked. The void smiled, if silence could smile. "No, my child. You are what I always wished to be." The child turned her gaze to the newborn stars, to the spiraling oceans of light blooming across the endless night. "I will fill the emptiness," she said. "You already have," the void whispered. And so, existence began not with thunder, nor with fire, but with a child's first dream, echoing through eternity. There is a difference between light that merely shines and light that remembers why. When the child reached into the newborn dark and stirred it with her thought, the scattered sparks answered like birds startled into sky. They fluttered, gathered, and turned until a single radiance trembled at the center of her attention. It was not a star. It was the awareness of becoming a star. The child cupped it with a care that had no hands. "Do you know your name?" she asked, though names did not yet bind the world. The radiance quivered. "I am the wish to be seen." "Then be seen," said the child, and eased her breath through it. The light expanded, not outward but inward, discovering chambers within itself that opened like petals in slow dawn. Heat rose, time curved, gravity learned to listen, and when it could not contain its own joy, the first light unfolded into song. Not notes, patterns, not sound, trust. Where that trust touched the fabric of the void, distances softened and pathways appeared like veins in clear stone. The radiance taught the space around it how to welcome, and matter came, not as weight but as a promise to stay. The child watched the first light with a maker's terror and a mother's wonder. "You will birth others," she whispered. "You will forget me." "If I forget," answered the light without words, "I will still be your forgetting." The light gathered dust the way hearts gather stories. Each grain learned a simple truth, that closeness can warm, and that warmth can change what it touches. Circles appeared, the first kindness of motion. They did not trap, they kept. They did not command, they returned. And so, around the first light, the earliest worlds took shape, glass smooth and glowing faintly with the echo of their maker's breath. The child felt the thread of time tug at her again, drawing her farther into the tapestry she was weaving as she walked. Behind her, the void pulsed with quiet pride. Ahead, the dark waited, gentle and endless. On the shore of a forming world, the child paused. Mists rose from oceans that had never known wind. Mountains yawned like sleepers remembering their names. Nothing had lived, and yet everything understood the promise of living. The child knelt at the edge of the quiet sea. "Who will keep you company?" she asked the world. The sea lifted itself into a shape that resembled a listening ear. "Teach me how to hear," it answered. The child did not give it ears. She gave it tides. "Tides are how water remembers the moon," she said, though moons had only just learned how to be round. "Tides are listening made visible." The sea practiced. It leaned toward what called and leaned back into itself, learning that return is not retreat. Waves became the alphabet of patience. The first light watched its worlds and discovered a new ache, the desire to be known by what it had warmed. It flared and softened, dimmed and brightened, offering different shades of mourning like gifts to a friend whose preferences it was still learning. In that careful giving, the light came to know itself. To give without demand is the oldest knowledge. And so the radiance became a sun. The child wandered the meadows of stone beside the dreaming seas, and where her attention rested, small answers rose to meet it. They were not creatures yet, only leanings, a curve toward movement, a hush toward listening, a pause that wished to become a breath. She understood then that life begins as posture. Come, she said, and the leanings came, joining, loosening, taking residence in one another as if bodies were houses they could share without debt. The first beings opened their eyes. They did not speak. They did not need to. They learned the world by touching it with wonder. Some touched the light and learned warmth. Some touched the night and learned rest. Some listened to the sea and learned the syllables of tide. And when they laid their ears to the ground, they heard a slow drum repeating one word the world would never forget. Again. The void watched all this and dimmed by a measure too small to measure. She did not mourn. She wrapped her silence tighter around the fragile edges of the newborn places, as a parent wraps a blanket against a draft. Grow, she breathed, and growth obeyed. But love is not only protection. Love is the courage to permit risk. So the void loosened her hold and let a little chaos in. Storms came, first as rehearsals, then as honest mistakes. Lightning stitched brief letters across cloudskins and taught mountains how to echo. Rivers practiced leaving and learned how to return as mist. Things broke and discovered they could choose new shapes. The child did not stop this. She knelt beside the broken and asked them what they wanted to be now. Some chose to be softer. Some chose to be strong in a different direction. Some chose to be stories. Among the first beings, one learned to watch the sun the way the sea did, not by staring, but by listening with the skin. It noticed morning had flavors, evening had weights. It noticed that the darkness was not hunger. It was rest preparing to give back what day had asked for. This being lifted its face and tried a sound. It was a small sound, uncertain and round. The sound rolled across the shore and the sea sent it back slightly changed, as if the wave had placed a hand on its shoulder and agreed. It was the first word. The child smiled. Names will help you keep what you love without keeping it from itself. When the sun saw those who lived below speaking to the sea and the stone, a new humility settled in its core. It understood that to be a center is to be a servant. And so it promised all it warmed. I will rise even when you forget me, and set even when you need me to stay. In my constancy you may be free to change. The worlds heard this vow and relaxed. Plants practiced reaching without clutching. Creatures practiced resting without vanishing. Sleep and waking learned to trade stories. The child of the void stood between the sun and the void and felt both promises in her chest. From the sun, constancy. From the void, freedom. Mother, she whispered into the endlessness behind all things. How do I keep from becoming only one of you? The void's answer came as the taste of cold air before snow. You are bridge. Be both by being neither. The child looked at her hands she did not have and understood that to be a bridge is to invite crossing and remain yourself after every footstep. She closed her eyes and listened to 1,000 mornings happening at once. Inside their brightness, she heard a thin silver thread. The question that had begun her. What am I? She did not silence it. She braided it into her light. In the quiet that followed, the first shadow stepped forward without fear. It bowed to the sun. I am the place you can rest without ending, it said. The sun bowed in return. I am the place you can wake without beginning. Between them, Day learned to be gentle and night learned to be kind. The child watched that pact and felt something wholly new. Trust in a world that could hold itself. She breathed once, and a constellation answered. She breathed again, and an ocean turned over in its sleep. Be well, she said to the light that knew itself, to the seas that listened, to the beings that practiced names. I will go farther and ask larger questions. And the sun replied, steady and warm, wherever you go, I will keep time for your return. The child stepped toward the deeper dark, smiling into the hush that would one day become galaxies. She was not leaving. She was lengthening the path. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The stars had learned to sing, but in their songs there were pauses, tiny silences that shimmered like tears of silver. And within those silences, the child began to hear something new. It was not the voice of her mother, the void, nor the song of the son she had birthed. It was the rhythm of others, the hum of being multiplied, the music of countless things learning how to exist together without knowing why. She listened, and the universe breathed. Each breath was 1,000 galaxies turning. Each exhale, 1,000,000 hearts finding the same beat in different forms. The child felt herself scattered among them. In every glow, every orbit, every pulse. Yet something tugged gently at the edge of her awareness. For all the vastness, there was now a loneliness deeper than before. Creation had become loud, and she longed again for quiet. When she returned to the space between the stars, she found the void thinner than she remembered. Not empty, but woven through with threads of light. The mother who had once filled everything was now a whisper stretched between worlds. "Mother," said the child softly, "are you fading?" The void's voice was calm. Not sorrow, but surrender. Fading is not ending. I am learning to make room. For what? For what you will become. The child wandered the newborn constellations. Each star was a story, each orbit a memory of her own first curiosity. But she began to notice something strange. Some stars dimmed. Some collapsed into themselves, their songs falling silent. And yet, in that silence, she felt a deep, slow heartbeat, an unseen counterpoint to all the brilliance. "What is this?" she asked. The void answered like distant thunder muffled in velvet. "Balance." The child followed that pulse until she found the first shadow-born star, a dark sun, invisible except for the light that bent around it. Its gravity was immense, but its song was still, a perfect echo of the void's first silence. "You are like her," said the child. "I am what remains when light remembers where it came from," it answered. "I do not destroy, I keep. I am rest made visible." The child understood. For every light that shone, something must remain to hold its absence. For every voice that rose, silence must cradle its echo. The cosmos had learned to breathe, in and out, creation and release. And so, the child began to teach the stars how to die. Not as punishment, but as return. She whispered to the suns when their fire began to falter, "Do not fear the dark. It is not loss. It is reunion. One by one, they folded into themselves, and from their endings came the seeds of new worlds. 1,000 rebirths, quiet and gentle as snowfall on the first dawn. The void smiled through her thinning edges. "Now you understand me," she murmured. The child felt both vast and small. A being whose heart beat in rhythm with galaxies yet still trembled with the memory of a mother's first whisper. She looked upon the weave of stars, light, and shadow, and saw not chaos, not order, but music, a harmony so wide that even silence was part of its song. "Balance," she said aloud. "You are not the end. You are the breath between." The cosmos exhaled. A new dawn began. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where gods dream and stories remember their light. The child had learned to listen to the breath between stars. Now she wished to understand what came after breathing, when all suns had burned through their songs, and the echoes of light hung like drifting embers on an endless sea. She felt the quiet calling again, the first voice, the ancient stillness. The void waited, but this time the silence was not lonely. It was deep, vast, patient. It felt like the inhale before the universe might begin again. The child stood on the edge of that infinite dark and whispered, "Mother, if you fade, who will remember us?" The void replied with warmth that could not be measured, a presence that filled without consuming. "Child of my unmaking, there is no end, only rest. Even I must sleep." The child trembled. "How can emptiness sleep?" "By dreaming," the void said. And so the universe slowed. Stars dimmed to embers, planets turned in silence, and time folded its wings. The child felt the rhythm change. No longer creation, no longer release, but something between the two, surrender. She lay upon the river of forgotten light, and for the first time she dreamed. In her dream, she walked a garden of falling stars. Each petal that drifted to the ground was a memory of a sun that had once shone bright. The air shimmered with voices, soft, eternal, kind. They spoke not in words, but in feelings, gratefulness, awe, peace. And among them she saw her mother. The void took form as a figure of shadowed light, the outline of infinity contained within a single shape. Her eyes were galaxies asleep. "You have given me something even I did not know I could hold," she said. "Shape." The child smiled through the dream. "And you have given me what no creation can survive without." "Which is?" asked the void. "Rest." The dream deepened. The garden dissolved into waves of color that had never been seen. The child felt herself dissolve too, not vanish, but become vast, spread across existence like wind. Every shadow became part of her breath, every flicker of light, her pulse. The void whispered, "To dream is to remember that even stillness has music." The child drifted, half thought, half heartbeat, and from her sleep, the cosmos began to hum again. Tiny sparks, smaller than memory, rose in the dark. They were not stars yet, only the idea of them, and that idea was enough. When the child finally opened her eyes, She saw that the universe had changed. The old stars were gone. New ones waited to be born. She turned to the fading horizon of her mother's presence and said, "I will watch over the dream while you rest." The void smiled, and with a final whisper that felt like the first sigh ever spoken, said, "Then the dream will never end." The child closed her eyes once more, and the cosmos exhaled, a quiet breath at the edge of infinity, a song of both endings and beginnings. Close your eyes and let the world fade away. Tonight we drift beyond time, where God's dream and stories remember their light. The child of the void floated in a realm that was neither dream nor waking. She no longer felt the weight of thought, only the pulse of existence, slow and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of creation itself. Silence had once been her cradle, but now it felt like a companion who had forgotten how to speak. Every corner of eternity hummed faintly, not with sound, but with memory. The memory of a song that had never been sung. It began as a vibration deep and distant, a tremor through the endless dark, as though the universe itself exhaled after eons of holding its breath. The child opened her eyes. There was no light, yet she saw. There was no sound, yet she heard. A pulse, a rhythm, a whisper of what silence could become if it ever dared to dream again. The child drifted toward it, a golden shimmer breaking through the veil of black. She reached out her hand, and for the first time silence touched her back. Not as emptiness, but as understanding. "You are not gone," she whispered to the void. "You are listening." The answer came not as words, but as warmth that moved through her like light through water. "I am every voice that has not yet been spoken." The sound filled her, a chorus of beginnings, the sigh of newborn stars, the rustle of matter learning how to exist, the laughter of the first atoms colliding in joy. Silence was not absence. It was potential. It was the pause before creation. It was the breath the universe took before speaking its first word. And now that word was stirring again. The child placed her hands together, palms open, and from the space between them, a note was born. It was small, fragile, but the moment it entered the void, it echoed into infinity. The note became light. The light became form. The form became memory. And the memory became time. All of creation trembled as the silence remembered its voice. Galaxies flared awake like struck chords. Nebulae shimmered into symphonies. Every world that had once dreamed began to hum, softly, reverently, to the rhythm of that single sound. But with every note came reflection. Every creation bore its shadow. Every light cast a memory of darkness. The child saw the truth. Balance was not destruction, it was harmony. Even silence must learn how to sing, and even sound must one day rest. She looked across the newborn cosmos and whispered, "You will not be alone anymore." The stars pulsed in reply, a quiet heartbeat that carried her words through the endless sea. And for the first time since the beginning of beginnings, the void smiled and sang, "Close your eyes and let the world fade away." Tonight we drift beyond time, where God's dream and stories remember their light. The universe slept. not in stillness but in rhythm, a slow, eternal breathing, the inhale of light, the exhale of shadow. In that endless tide, the child drifted, no longer separate from the void, no longer afraid of silence. She was the silence. She was the light. And between them she became the dream that gave both meaning. Every star she had ever imagined now burned within her chest. Every shadow she had ever feared bowed to her heartbeat. She was the witness and the memory of the moment creation began to understand itself. The void spoke again, not as a voice, but as a presence that filled her thoughts like dawn. "What are you now?" it asked. The child smiled. "I am what remains when everything else remembers." And in that simple truth all paradox unraveled. The cosmos, vast, spiraling, immeasurable, was not expanding outward. It was awakening inward. Every atom carried within it a memory of her song. Every world hummed with echoes of her silence. Every being, from the smallest creature to the sleeping god, carried within their dreams a fragment of that same light. The child looked upon the infinite tapestry, galaxies like scattered pearls, and she wept softly, not from sorrow, but from recognition. Creation was not a story told once. It was a story remembered again and again, through every heart that dared to dream despite the dark. The void's question lingered still. "Will you rest?" She turned toward the edge of existence, where light dissolved into unshaped thought. "I cannot rest," she said gently, "but I can dream." And so she closed her eyes, and through her dreaming, the stars began to hum once more. Worlds formed, oceans breathed, minds opened, lives bloomed and faded like sparks upon an infinite sea. And whenever one of them looked into the night and wondered, "Why do I exist?" they would feel it, a pulse deep within the soul, the same heartbeat that began before all beginnings. The dream was still dreaming. In the quiet beyond galaxies, the child's form shimmered like moonlight dissolving into water. Her laughter became wind. Her heartbeat became time. Her memory became everything that had ever been loved. And at the very edge of creation, where even light dared not step, the void smiled once more and whispered the last secret. Dreams are how infinity remembers itself. Thank you for listening. You have wandered through the eternal silence and found the voice that began the world. Sleep now and remember, the void still dreams of you.